All right, for the sake of time, I think we can go ahead and kick this off. I know we have a lot of great things to hear from some of our teams today. So welcome. My name is Carrington Lott. I'm Deputy Director at Systems for Action. This is a recurring webinar series that features innovative research being conducted through the Systems for Action Research Program Office. If you're not familiar with Systems for Action, we are a national research program office that is funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and we're housed at the Colorado School of Public Health. We at Systems for Action study ways of aligning the medical, social, and public health systems to address health equity for communities across the country. And in this webinar series, we profile studies that are being conducted through the program at different points in their research studies to learn what the researchers are learning through their work in sort of a real-time way. So today we're showcasing the work of the Systems Alignment Innovation Hub. Systems for Action helped design the Innovation Hub program a few years ago to create more space for non-research focused organizations like community-based organizations to engage in our research program with their innovative ideas to address systems alignment. The Innovation Hub's been up and running for about 2 years, and today is a special treat because you're going to get to hear from their first cohort of grantees. This is the final session in a two-part webinar series. The first part of this webinar series was last Wednesday, where we heard from two of their other grantee research teams, and we're going to be hearing from the final two teams today. A few housekeeping items before I hand it over to the Systems Alignment Innovation Hub. Today's session will be recorded, and we'll send follow-up communication with the recording and the slides after today's session. We'll also reserve some time at the end of today's webinar for Q&A. So if any questions come up at any point during today's session, please locate the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen and enter your question. Since we're going to be hearing from two different teams today, please try when you ask your question to indicate which team your question is for so that we can address the correct individuals to respond to those questions. And we will reserve all of the Q&A after both teams have presented. So we will make sure to address those after the presentation. I am going to go ahead and hand it over to our lovely leaders of the System Alignment Innovation Hub. I believe LaMont Green and Lori Harris are going to lead us through some context setting, and then they'll do a little bit more in-depth introduction of the grantees that you'll be hearing from today. Thank you for joining, and LaMont, go ahead and take it away, please.
Nice. Thank you so much, Carrington. First, we just want to give a huge thank you to the Systems for Action National Program Office team, Glenn, Carrington, Sadina, Phoebe, Julie, and Nate. They've been wonderful partners. And also the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation program officers, Carolyn, Isabel, Leah, thank you. And thank you all for trusting us at TAC and our partners with Wayfinders and Human Services Research Institute for implementing your brainchild, right? The Systems Alignment Innovation Hub. My name is LaMont Green. I use he, him, they pronouns, and I'm the director of the Systems Alignment Innovation Hub. I'm also a Gullah Geechee native from the Low Country Sea Islands of South Carolina. I'm a person with lived experience of homelessness and substance use and racism and homophobia and all the things, right? But more importantly, I'm a community organizer that really believe that we can have collective liberation, that we can have a world where we all thrive. And it's been such a privilege to work with my sister, my colleague, co-conspirator, Lori. Lori, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Brother Lamont. Aloha mai kako. My name is Lori Pampilo Harris. I'm one of the partners who are the supporters of the community leaders and researchers who you will hear from today. I'm a Kanaka Mo'oli, more familiar to you as a native Hawaiian. I'm also identified as Filipina, a daughter of an immigrant where our family is a descendant of the Mandaya Muslim clan. I'm also a person with lived experience of homelessness, and also a person with lived experience of many of the systems that our grantees and you all are trying to wrestle with when it comes to systems alignment and systems transformation. And so just really honored to be able to share this time with you all as we're journeying, as we sharing our journey with you all through the Systems Alignment Innovation Hub.
Thank you so much, Lori. And so what we wanted to share with you all today before you hear from our phenomenal grantees, we are centering our work in two primary frameworks. One is equity-centered community design that I'm going to share briefly about, and the other is a decolonization and indigenous framework that my sister Lori is going to share about. And so let's talk about equity-centered community design. So this framework that we're utilizing with our grantees along their journey and coming up with their innovation, right, to improve the health of their focused population is equity-centered community design. And this is a problem-solving and innovation-generating process based on equity, humility building, and integrating history and healing practices to design effective solutions with communities most impacted being in the driver's seat. Communities most impacted being in the driver's seat, working in collaboration with system partners. And this hybrid model was developed by me and my colleague, Dastasia Moore at TAC, combining the core elements of human-centered design with some other frameworks that we found to be very helpful in assisting communities and coming up with solutions to reimagine and redesign their system. And so what we did is we took a framework by the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, wonderful organization. They have the most amazing undoing institutional racism training, and they have been a huge mentor for me on my journey. And they offer this power analysis and liberated gatekeeping framework that really allows us to unpack, to be able to identify and describe the ways that systems act as a foot of oppression. Because before we do the work of dismantling and transforming and healing, we have to go to the root. We have to name it. We have to identify it, and we have to describe it. And this power analysis really helps us to understand why there are so many Black, brown, and Indigenous people experiencing homelessness and poverty. And, when we look at the social determinants of health, such poor outcomes, and allows us to shift from an approach that is really laced in saviorism, where we are trying to, quote unquote, fix disenfranchised groups, to recognizing what the real conditions are, right? Those systemic and structural conditions that are bearing down on people. And so it's an equity-centered community. I just love it. It's really wonderful. And we also, in this model, blend some really key features of implementation science. So for example, as communities go through this process, we use the three-circle analysis, which is an evidence-based approach to help you to prioritize which of your solutions or innovations are going to be most feasible, by looking at what do communities most impacted want, what does the evidence and best practice say, and what is the capacity of the providers or the system to implement. And it's right in that nexus, that sweet spot in the middle. And so we're really, really excited about this. Over the recent years, human-centered design has been playing a crucial role in healthcare innovation by placing patients and healthcare providers at the center. And it's been used a lot in the tech industry, coming up with all kinds of wonderful gadgets that we just, can't live without, and things like TikTok. I was social media resistant until TikTok came along, and I became addicted, right? And so this all human-centered design, right? To really understand the psychology, the needs, and deeply empathize to design things. And so we've been using this more in the social services as well, because it's highly effective, because it allows us to understand the experiences, the preferences, the pain points, right? And designers are able to create more effective solutions. But where we evolve from traditional human-centered design approaches is equity-centered community design goes further by shifting the model of development where communities most impacted are leading the design of solutions in collaboration with system partners. Equity-centered community design explicitly acknowledges systemic inequalities and oppression by examining power dynamics and historical contexts, and explicitly aiming to dismantle these root causes to create more equitable outcomes, right? We've been doing so much work over, several decades to improve population level health, and we just haven't seen the impact. And so it's going to be by shifting this model of development, by building community power. So Ron Chisholm, one of the founders of the People's Institute, he has this quote that I just love. He says, poor Black people, poor brown people, poor Indigenous people, they don't need programming, they need their power back. And so that is one of the fundamental elements of equity-centered community design. And so just in summary, what does this look like with our grantees, right? So our grantees are coming together, they're utilizing the equity-centered community design process, they're bringing together the public health, social service, and medical sector. They're going through this process to come up with an innovation or select an intervention. Once they have that, they will develop a theory of change logic model regarding that innovation or intervention, and a research design plan and an implementation plan. And then in the next phase, they will then launch their pilot study or proof of concept to further refine and understand what works. So that is equity-centered community design. And now I'm going to pass it to Lori to share about the decolonization and indigenization framework.
Thank you, LaMont, and just a powerful framework to work off of with the equity-centered community design and this opportunity that we have before us around overlaying a decolonizing framework. And this is for a path for healing and transformation. So last week, if you joined us, I shared one of my favorite quotes from James Baldwin, where he says, "There is reason after all that some people wish to colonize the moon and others dance before it as an ancient friend." And I shared how I thought that quote, really looking through the lens of our modern struggles, says that it's not just about the moon, it's about how we approach life and how we approach seemingly unintractable issues we are trying to solve. So I want to tell you a quick story that I heard from my psychologist who was giving a TED Talk. She talks about an elder from Rwanda and who shares this powerful story in the aftermath of the national trauma caused by the Rwandan Civil War. She talks about how the people of Rwanda were brokenhearted and needed this collective healing. And this elder was sharing this story, and the elder said, all these Westerners came and were mental health professionals and claimed they were going to help us, and they were going to help us heal. And the elder continues his story. He said, they were going to come and help us feel better, but they came with no songs. They came without dancers. They didn't bring any storytellers. They separated us from each other. They took us out of the sun and put us into dark rooms and told us to tell them our most painful memories. This was not healing to us, and we had to ask them to leave. They were bringing unintended harm and not healing. When we think about Indigenous and local healers around the world and those who are problem solving at the local level, we would want to approach trauma and needed community healing with a different set of questions. Questions like, when did you lose connection with your creator? When did you stop honoring your ancestors? When did you stop singing? And as James Baldwin was pointing out, when did you stop dancing under the moon? Answers to those questions gives us a different diagnosis, right? It's like turning the kaleidoscope a little bit and just seeing something new that we never saw before. And when you're answering to those questions and looking at a different diagnosis, it gives different pathways to solutions that unfortunately Western thinking doesn't usually give space to. And answers to those questions would provide a different type of solutions to restore that proper balance to systems that are creating those harms. It forces us to shift from an over-focus and over-emphasis on the individual's responsibility and start paying attention to systems and historical context and harm. So what I'm about to share is critical to reimagining how we approach systems alignment and transformation. It's what I shared last week, but for those who weren't here and for those who are here again, it's worth articulating once again. When it comes to our decolonization journey as a systems alignment innovation hub, it includes this pledge for truth over comfort. We understand that colonization shows up every day in our world. We then, listen to this, we identify and we look for those dominant voices, those dominant perspectives and narratives that often shape our mainstream strategies, research, and best practices and solutions. And then here's the critical point that we do, this critical action, we decenter them in order to amplify the voices, experiences, and learnings and histories of people who are often erased in our efforts in framework around racial justice and social impact change. So just like we apply Western methodologies to address a problem we are solving, how can we use local knowledge systems, lived experience, ancient and indigenous ways of knowing to solve that same problem? This is an opportunity to understand how different ways of knowing and doing could be perceived, presented, and practiced as equal to Western ways of knowing and doing. This is an opportunity for the project and efforts you're about to hear from to be active and integral in a decolonization movement for political liberation, for systems alignment and transformation, and the development of an economic system that serves all of us rather than threatens our collective life on this planet. Standing within this framework of equity-centered community design and decolonization is United Indians of All Tribes Foundation. I am so excited that you'll be hearing from them and hearing from the Lived Experience Coalition. Just like last week with our other two grantees, I know that you will walk away from this time with them inspired and filled with gratitude, knowing that we have these beautiful souls, courageous people who are building a local movement, and they are willing to dance under the moon. I'd like to bring into this space now Dr. Mike Tulee and Ben Bryer with United Indians of All Tribes to share about their systems alignment innovation project.
Thanks, Lori. And I'll start it off. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to our Research in Progress presentation. We are with the United Indians of All Tribes Native Veterans Program, and I'll kick it over to our Executive Director, Mike, who will lead us with the land acknowledgement.
So folks, it's, if you could just take a minute to read the caption that was provided to you, and then we'll proceed. Thank you, folks. First, we'd like to acknowledge those wonderful words that was just expressed. Well, just a very powerful introduction, and I really appreciate that. You know, we got a lot of people, natives and native veterans, go through a lot of struggles, and I really enjoyed those words that was just provided. So first off, if we could move forward on the slide. Do you want to talk a little bit about the space, Ben?
Sure. Here we have some maps locating us within the Pacific Northwest. On the left, we have a map of the traditional homelands of the native tribes before colonization, including their language regions. And then on the right is where we are located in Discovery Park in Seattle, just at the tip of Discovery Park and Magnolia. And I'll pass it back to you, Mike.
Oddly, this very the place where we are residing on right now was once a military installation. I had gone to a ceremony here probably about 25 years ago, and oddly, my father had joined us. My brother and I. My brother is being honored for graduating from the University of Washington. My father, just out of the blue, said, "You know, this place looks starkly familiar." And he thought about it for a second, and I said, "Oh, I know. This is where I was shipped out to go to Korea back in 1950." So it's kind of a full circle, 50 years moving forward. It was about the year 2000 when he was, this was known as a MEP station, where a lot of sailors and Army personnel and Marines had been shipped to Korean War at that time. And one thing I'd like to also note is that my father was a Korean War vet, and his two older brothers were World War II vets. And you know, they didn't have any kind of after care once they left the war, and they carried a lot of burden with them. And even to their dying day, they never wanted to once talk about their time and facing the field of battle, which I'm glad to see that that has remarkably changed today. Next slide, please. So I'll just say a little bit about myself. My name is Mike Tulee. I graduated from a little town called White Swan, which is located on the Yakima Indian Reservation in 1979. Went into the military a little afterward. I was in the Air Force. I was a mechanic it was after Vietnam. Got out in the early 80s, mid 80s, and went on to become a teacher, and eventually taught at the University of Washington, and I've been here at United Indians for almost 8 years. I pass the baton on to you, Ben.
Thanks, Mike. Again, my name is Ben. I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts, and I've been in Seattle now for about 3 years. My ancestors come from the Jewish villages of Eastern Europe, including Poland, Germany, and Lithuania. My maternal grandparents made their way to North America after surviving the Holocaust during World War II, and their legacies inspired me to work to make the world a little bit better at a time. And now we'll go on to a little bit of history about our organization.
So I'll just talk while you're reading the caption. This was kind of born during the time of civil unrest. Vietnam War was at a full pace, starting about 1964 all the way to 1975. But right around about 1970, there was so much poverty within the city of Seattle that an Army veteran named Bernie Whitebear, along with 100 other colleagues, had, shall I say, infiltrated or invaded this Army base, and they took it over peacefully for about 30 days. And eventually, it got to the point where Jane Fonda, of all people, straight off of her cinematic hit known as Barbarella, decided to come to the site and protest along with the Native Americans. And it was a lot of her action as well as the natives' action that caused President Nixon to get involved. And at the time, he told Henry Jackson and Warren Magnuson, who were our two U.S. senators for Washington State at the time, get these damn Indians off the front page of the newspapers. It's bad for politics. And so they actually started to speak with the then mayor, Wes Ullman, talked him into negotiating with these Native Americans. And after a bit of time, they finally came to an agreement where they would allow Native Americans to occupy, and I do mean occupy, we still don't own this place, 20 acres, and we would be leasing the property as well as this building, which has been here since 1977. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Ben.
Yeah, we can move on to the next slide. Thank you, Mike. So our organization, United Indians of All Tribes Foundation, is run for and by Indigenous people. And we serve people from all tribes, especially those who may have been displaced from their tribal homelands. Our mission is to provide educational, cultural, and social services that reconnect Indigenous people in the Puget Sound region to their heritage by strengthening their sense of belonging and significance as Native people. Our vision is to be a social service provider community center, and cultural home for urban Indians. So some examples of cultural services include our annual powwow in late July, a native art market during the holidays, a rotating Indigenous art gallery in our building, an Indigenous radio station, which you can listen to at daybreakstarradio.com. Family services include a preschool, foster care support, a strong fathers program, a home visiting program for families with young kids, and our community services include a youth home for young adults experiencing housing instability, benefits navigation, an elders program, homelessness prevention, tenant services, a Native workforce, and of course, our Native Veterans program. Our organization is represented by an Indigenous board of directors, and we are over 0.75% staff are people of color. We can go to the next slide. So our research team is centered around our folks with lived experience in our Indigenous Veterans Advisory Board. Right now, we have about 8 people who have committed to joining our advisory board and committed to seeing our project through. They will lead the direction of our project and co-manage the design team. They will work with our system partners to identify our priorities, ideate solutions, and design pilot program prototypes. Our advisory board will draw from their lived experience as Native veterans and their standing as leaders in the community to ensure that our project is relevant to the context of our community. We are represented by members of coastal, Alaskan, and Plains tribes from various branches of the military, including the Marines, the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy, as well as multiple generations of U.S. conflicts, including wars in Vietnam, the Gulf, Iraq, and Afghanistan. On our United Indians side, I am the research coordinator and analyst for this research project. Audrey is our director of homelessness prevention and veterans programs. Jenna is our community service director, and Mike, of course, is our executive director. Next slide. So here is some information just about our population and about Native veterans in general at large. And a lot of this information comes from the VA, and I can share more sources afterwards if people are interested. Native Americans serve in the armed forces about 5 times the national average. About 1% of the general population serves in the military, so about 5% of Native Americans serve in the military. And it's important to note that they've played a major role in every U.S. conflict since the American Revolution. And for their valor in battle, about 29 medals of honor have been given to Native American soldiers for their valor. About a higher percentage of female American Indian Alaska Native service members serve in the armed forces compared to the general military population. Here in King County in Seattle, around 11% of Indigenous veterans are female, whereas only 9% of all veterans in the area are female. Native service members also disproportionately serve in violent combat. One statistic I found saw that about 48% of Native service members have experience of serving in a combat of war zone, compared to only 33% or 1/3 of all veterans. They're more likely to be on the front lines. And this is important to note because our population may have compounding trauma from their military service, including the trauma from a history of colonization and a genocide of Indigenous people. In King County, where we're located, there are about 2,500 veterans who identify as American Indian, Alaska Native alone or in combination with another race, most of whom served in the Vietnam War era. And another interesting thing to note is that since we're based in Seattle, we mostly serve an urban Native population, as you saw in our mission. And in general, veterans living in urban areas have better health outcomes than veterans living in rural areas. But research has shown that Native veterans living in urban areas do not experience the same health advantages compared to Native veterans living in rural areas. In other words, living in urban areas is generally a protective factor for veterans, but research has shown that Native veterans living in urban areas do not experience the same type of advantages, benefits, and protections that are afforded to the general veteran population. And these disparities may exist due to high levels of combat experience, overall health challenges of American Indian, Alaska Native veterans, and historical and contemporary traumas within Native veteran communities. We can go to the next slide, unless Mike, if you have anything to add there. Okay.
You're doing great.
Thank you. Now on to our grand challenge. So part of our systems alignment innovation research project is to develop a grand challenge. As of now, our grand challenge is to co-develop a systems alignment strategy with Native veterans and medical, public health, and social service providers to address systemic racism and improve culturally grounded, trauma-informed, and racially equitable care coordination for Native veterans in the Puget Sound region. So a bit of a mouthful right now, but I will take a second just so that people can absorb that, and then we can move on. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So a little bit of background research on some of the challenges facing Native veterans that we found through our background research, and then we'll move on to what we're hearing from our community. So in the literature, we have seen that Native veterans have challenges around mental health issues. They have about double the rate of PTSD and suicidal ideation than non-Hispanic white veterans. We are seeing high rates of alcohol, opioid, and substance use dependency. And though there isn't a consensus in the literature about the rates of these substance use among Native veterans, we often hear this topic as a current challenge from our community. Native veterans are more likely to experience a service-connected disability or injury. They're more likely to experience a chronic disease. They're overrepresented in housing instability and homelessness among all veterans. In terms of healthcare, Native veterans have higher odds of being uninsured. They're more likely to forego or delay care due to difficulty in accessing appointments or due to financial barriers. They also may experience racial misclassification as more than one race or other. So they may not even be counted as Native or Indigenous. And racial misclassification is a pervasive problem in research for Indigenous communities. In one study, we found over half of veterans who racially identified as American Indian or Alaska Native also indicated at least one other race, compared to only 1% of white veterans who identified as multiracial. So the population that we are serving, we may expect about half of them to identify as multiracial, whereas that is about 1% in a white population. If multiracial Indigenous people are not being identified or categorized as Native, then they may not qualify or have access to services designed for Native people. And data aggregation of multiracial Indigenous people tends to underrepresent Native people in public health data and reporting. So that's a really important issue I wanted to bring up. There may also be a lack of traditional healing services at facilities and services directed for veterans. One study we found around 15% of VA facilities in the Western US indicated that their centers provided traditional healing services for American Indian Alaska Natives. And many of the staff at those centers believe the needs of Native veterans were not being adequately met. On the right, we see a graph of VA benefit utilization by program. As we learned earlier, Native Americans serve in the military at much higher rates than any other racial group. Yet, Native veterans utilize VA benefits at much lower rates as compared to all other racial groups. And this disparity is really important to note. And we only see a parity when we're looking at memorial benefits, which is really important. So we want to make sure that we are helping to increase those utilization rates. Next slide. So during our annual powwow a few weeks ago, we did some surveys with Native veterans in our community, as well as during our elders program that we host here at United Indians. And we collected some demographic information from our Native veterans. We asked them a few questions about some of the challenges that they may be facing. And one of the questions we asked was, what are the biggest health challenges that urban Native veterans face? So we can see in this word cloud, there are some recurring themes and answers that we saw. We heard housing and homelessness and rental instability as a major theme. We saw that many people struggled with the VA benefits navigation. People complained about a lack of communication from the VA. People shared experiences with substance use, diabetes management, PTSD, nutrition, and so on. So this is just a brief showing of some of the answers that we received. And we will use this initial information as we inform our approach and when we stand up, or as we continue to stand up our advisory board and our design team. Next slide. This list is an example of some of our proposed system partners as we're bringing together our co-design team. We have organizations represented from the multiple different sectors that we want to bring together. So those from the medical system, the public health system, and the social services system. Those in green are those that we already have buy-in to join our program and our team, our design team as partners. And those in orange are those who are still looking to develop relationships with and get buy-in for our project. And so you can see we've already connected with the VA and lots of other Native services in the Seattle area. And we will continue building these relationships as we go on. Next slide. So we're seeing this framework again. This is our equity-centered community design with the components of the system that we are looking to address through our project. And we are closer to the top within this wheel. We are still inviting our diverse co-creators to the table. We are still finalizing our grand challenge, and we are looking to get started on our history and healing and power analysis in the next few weeks as we bring together our Native veterans and our partners. Next slide. So some next steps about our project. First and foremost, we are standing up our co-design team. So it's bringing together our Indigenous Advisory Board with our Native veterans, plus our system partners from our medical, public health, and social service sectors in the area. We want to choose a Lushootseed name for our project. Lushootseed was the dominant language shared by the local tribal communities, and it was sometimes referred to as the language of the Puget Sound. We want to ground our project in the traditional caretakers of the land, and choosing a Lushootseed name is one way to honor those past and present. And so that is something that is a priority for us. And we will continue our equity-centered community design processes to co-design our pilot program for Native veterans. So that includes continuing to collect stories and collect data from our community, whether through surveys, whether through interviews, whether through informal conversations, whether through elders programs, you name it. We are looking to find people where they are, meet them where they're at, and collect those stories so that we can best cater to the needs of our population. Next slide. And lastly, we want to leave you with this call to action to be an advocate for Indigenous people and Native veterans wherever you are, from close or from afar. We want to serve those who served our country, and to the Native peoples who have put their lives on the line to protect us at home and abroad. We want to honor our warriors for their sacrifice and do our part to improve health systems, care services, and outcomes for our community. And if you're interested in learning more, we have a list of resources here where you can learn about the history of Native veterans that goes long back. You may have heard of the American Indian or Navajo code talkers during World War II. And if you haven't, it's an amazing story, and I encourage you to learn more. And if you have any questions about any of the data we presented, I'll be happy to share some citations, and I thank you so much for listening and looking forward to answering any questions.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Michael Tulee and Ben. That was so amazing. You all, let's give them some virtual love, some virtual applause. Dr. Tulee, I don't think you know me. I live in the Puget Sound area, but I'm such a huge fan of you and your work, and United Indian of All Tribes Foundation. I actually had a privilege to attend a powwow at the Daystar Break Center. And when I worked in King County, work with Jenna and the wonderful work that you guys are doing with the Lavatia group home. I always say that the land acknowledgements are so powerful, but there's so many things that we can do to move into action. There are so many tribes that are not federally recognized, and you all can go to United Indian of All Tribes Foundation website and donate to this wonderful work too. So thank you all so much. That was awesome. So now we're going to move on to the Lived Experience Coalition in Washington State, also in Washington State, and they are going to share about their project.
Thank you, LaMont. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Alrighty. My name is Marvin Futrell, and I am privileged and grateful to introduce or continue our update on our project, Survive to Thrive. Undoing systemic racism to address and eradicate gun violence among Black, Brown, and Indigenous young men experiencing housing insecurity. Next slide. Our team is made up solely right now of folks who have all been impacted by gun violence. I myself am a 3-time survivor of gun violence. I experienced it first as a youth. I was 8. I was caught in crossfire on a playground. And through that, while I survived, I endured the loss of those 2 others who did not. As life progressed, gun violence did not abate. In middle school, walking home with friends, again, caught in crossfire of other individuals that led to me being shot and one of my classmates dying. And on into adult life, being shot in crossfire at a nightclub in Miami, that all 3 struck me as, why doesn't anyone talk about it? Why doesn't anyone examine the nature of gun violence? So I'm really happy today to introduce our team. For those that aren't presenting today, I want to acknowledge the efforts of Jazzy Rollins, a wonderful artist and community organizer. Rhonda Walker, who gives great project support, is a beautiful community organizer and also serves as the Lived Experience Coalition's Southwest Washington lead. And Courtney Love, again, a beautiful organizer in Pierce County. She's also lending a ton of project support, and she is the Lived Experience Coalition's Director of State and Local Advocacy. Next slide. I would like to I would like to introduce our presenters for today. Have them introduce themselves. Brother Token.
How are you doing, everybody? Good morning. My name is Brother Token. I'm the principal investigator and director of Survive to Thrive, as well as the financial minister of the Black Panther Party of Washington. I'd like to give it to CJ.
Hello, my name is CJ Walker, he, him. I'm the co-principal investigator and director of youth homelessness in the LEC, and as well as a Y4Y member within Commerce. Next slide.
Thank you. The Lived Experience Coalition's mission statement is, I can honestly say, something to be lived into. The Lived Experience Coalition is a diverse, multi-generational community who are coming together to lift each other up, heal individually and collectively, and advocate for ourselves and others, advancing racial and social justice. The Lived Experience Coalition works beyond oppressive structures by unifying our voices, speaking truth to power, working together to dismantle multi-system barriers impacting people who are experiencing homelessness, involvement in the carceral legal system, and for those unmet behavioral health needs and or fleeing violence or emotional psychological victimization. This has been our grounding as we lead ourselves into our different spaces that work. And if I have forgotten my, other than my name, I serve the LEC as the Director of Policy and Strategy. And I'm a clinical instructor at the University of Washington. And I sit or work with several boards in King County. So I will pass it off to Brother Token, and he'll.
Thank you, Marvin.
All righty.
Good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Brother Token, and I appreciate you giving us this time because this is very important. This means a lot to all of us. It's deeply personal, not just to me, but the entire team, not just because of our roles in this project, but because we've lived through these struggles and we're here to address it. You know, I've personally been homeless. I've been in the crosshairs of gun violence, not just, you know, as a statistic, but in lived reality. So it's within that, our grand challenge is hoping to eradicate this, you know, is to address the gun violence fueled by housing insecurity and institutional racism through an effort led by Black, Brown, and Indigenous young men who are bringing together public health, medical, and social services, along with the carceral legal system to develop policy and programmatic innovations that return power back to the communities most impacted and promote safety for those communities effectively. So those communities know what it means to be targeted by violence and face instability of homelessness and to navigate the systems that were never designed to serve them. This is a challenge that demands innovation, not just in policy, but how we approach the very idea of community safety. It's about developing policies and programs that don't just respond to crises, but that prevent them from happening and creating a system that truly serves the people, one that recognizes the respect of the humanity of those it's meant to protect. But more than that, it's about promoting safety in a way that empowers communities. We're not just looking to reduce violence, we're aiming to rebuild communities and restore the dignity that has been stripped away for far too long. Next slide, please. Our theory of change isn't just a set of ideas on paper, it's a reflection of our shared truth, succinctly summed up by a quote from Just Lead Washington. Those of us who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution, though we are often furthest from the power and resources. And we believe that if we truly listen to our communities and when their needs are met with compassion and dignity, we can begin to reduce the desperation that often leads to violence and crime. Next slide, please. So our team is built from lived experience. We've all faced the challenges of homelessness and the impact of gun violence. And this isn't just a job for us, it is literally our lives. We represent the community we serve. 75% of our team identifies as Black, Brown, or Indigenous, with the remaining 25% identifying as white. And we know that representation matters. It's not just about having a seat at the table, it's about ensuring that the voices and perspectives of those who have been historically marginalized are at the center of decision-making. Our lived experience gives us a unique understanding of the problems we're addressing, and this understanding is crucial for developing solutions that are truly effective and equitable. If you could go to the next slide, please, and thank you. So the problem we face is deeply rooted in our society's history of systemic racism and inequality. In 2023, 6,000 children and teenagers were shot, more than 1,600 of them died. And to be truthfully honest, if you guys, I work with children, so it's, I don't know if it's, I'm going to take a moment here to get a little personal. This is that I work with I work at the Boys and Girls Club, and I mentor a lot of kids in this. And Marvin's story is actually repeated within, kids at the Boys and Girls Club. I know a boy who's 17 years old who talks about how when he had to go back, when he was affected by gun violence, 2 of his friends died on the playground, and he had to go back to that playground that was still stained by their blood, and that's something that should really, really affect us, is that these kids have to live through this and just deal with it every day. It's not just words, it's not just, feelings, it's life. It's lives cut short and families shattered. So for young Black males, the risk is even greater of, being affected by gun violence. They're 20 times more likely to die by gun homicide than their white peers. And nearly half of all mass shootings occur in the majority of Black communities. The same communities are disproportionately affected by homelessness, with Black Americans making up over almost 40% of the homeless population. And for Latino and Indigenous communities, the statistics are equally grim. They're twice as likely to die by gun violence compared to white people, and they're overrepresented in homeless population. And we know that homelessness increases the risk of gun violence. 45% of unhoused young adults experience gun violence, and 17% engage in it. And these are not just statistics, they're cries for help. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please. So the truth is, these numbers don't tell the whole story. The real story is about the intergenerational trauma that our communities carry, the trauma of having our lives devalued, of being targeted by the systems that are supposed to protect us, and of being forced to navigate a world that often sees us as a problem rather than as people. This trauma manifests itself in ways through gun violence, yes, but also through incarceration, poverty, and homelessness. And it's all connected. It all stems from the same root, a society that has long failed to value Black, brown, and Indigenous lives. When our young people are pushed to the boundaries, when they are denied access to basic necessities like housing, education, and healthcare, they're left with very few options. And this is not a failure of individuals, it's a failure of the systems. This is why our work is so crucial. We know that young Black, brown, and Indigenous men are disproportionately impacted by gun violence, and the systemic failures that fuel it, the school to prison pipeline, the homelessness to prison pipeline, these aren't just abstract concepts, they're lived realities for too many of our brothers and sisters. For what makes it even worse is that the system is not equipped to support us in the ways that we need. There's a profound lack of culturally appropriate support and a failure that leaves our young people vulnerable to cycles of violence and incarceration. But we're not here to just talk about the problem. We're here to do something about it. And Brother CJ, if you could lead us into the solution.
Thank you. I will. So the solution, our solution will use a system alignment approach to prevent and reduce gun violence for young Black, brown, and Indigenous men by creating a design team by those men with various system partners to make something that works together. We don't want to have just the system partners dictating or choosing what is good and wrong. We want those who are impacted be there at the table, tell us what's going on, and give us feedback. And by doing so, we identify by addressing the root causes of gun violence and reimagining the coordination of services and resources across systems. By dismantling systematic racism within service systems, we can make sure that our young men can have an easy way through life without having any extra hurdles. And building capacity among collaboration among the partners. And our focus of area will be Washington State, and particular attention, if not all counties, King, Pierce, Clark, Snohomish, Spokane, and our Yakima. Next slide, please. These are our current system partners that we're working with. In the medical system, we have Justin Daniels. He's part of Peace Health. In the social service system, we have Mustafa Muhammad. He's a mental health professional and a clinician with Refugees Northwest Counseling. In the public health system, we have Simone Adu. He's Seattle King County Public Health. Next slide, please. This is our ask. The solution to the problem is not just a project, it's a movement rooted in the principles of equity, centered design, and deeply committed to ensuring diversity, equity, and inclusion. We ask you to take what you learned today, utilize it, and share it in communities most affected, in your own organizations and in your own life. And please visit us at wearelec.org, and excited to answer more questions.
Woo! Wow, wow, wow. I got goosebumps. Wow, that was amazing. That was amazing. Thank you, Brother CJ. Thank you, Brother Token. I am so hopeful about our future. And we got like 4 minutes. We might go 5 minutes over. So those that can stay on, that's great. We're going to answer some questions. And then we want to share about the Community Power Network. So we might go 5 minutes over, but that was powerful. So we will now bring all of our panelists back, all of our wonderful grantees back. And I see we have 2 questions here. And the first is for Ben and Dr. Michael Tulee. Oh, we have till 1:15. Excellent. I could slow down. Let me take a deep breath. Wow. That was powerful. So let's have all of our grantees come back together. Yes, and our wonderful team. So Ben and Dr. Tulee, we have a question here from Miss Esmeralda Hernandez. Thank you, Esmeralda, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. And her question is your advisory board, your Indigenous Advisory Board, a decision-making group with true partnership, or are they a board whose advice the decision makers in your group project can decide to take or leave? Excellent question, Esmeralda. Ben and Mike.
Great question, Ben.
Yeah, the purpose of the advisory board, thanks for that question, is to be a decision-making body. We want to make sure that they are the ones who are taking the lead on the direction of the project, making sure that the solution that we end up choosing is being decided on and developed and designed as a group. And my job is a coordinator, and that's really just that. I want to make sure I can set up the meetings and sort of let the team run with it as they desire. And so as the coordinator, I'm making sure that I can set up the advisory board and set up the design team, making sure that they are the ones with the true decision making and power in deciding how we develop our pilot program and how we allocate our resources. So that's our intention, and that's how we are setting up our team.
Thank you, Ben. Dr. Tulee, anything you wanted to add?
Well, I would say that we really value the people that we've been attracting in so far. For veterans, a lot of the times it's not easy for them to just come forward and say, hey, I want to offer a lot of, what I consider powerful and useful advice. Some of them who may be war veterans, especially, they're reluctant to come forward. I think you may have heard me mention even like my father and my uncles, it was something they find that was very traumatic. So it's not easy for people to just readily come forward to offer what we would consider very useful advice on how to work with the veterans at large. Even though we know the need is there, it takes a kind of a tender touch, a gentle approach, very sensitive, but yet very convincing manner to get them to come forward. And I think I commend Ben for his efforts, because it's, again, even though we have a rather sizable number of natives in our community that are veterans, again, it's not it's not quite, it's kind of a balancing act to get them to have a strong kind of a affinity to be present for these very important endeavors.
Very nice. Thank you, Dr. Tulee. And I see here that Ms. Hernandez, she's really glad in the chat to hear that. And she said thank you. All right. And so we have another question here, and this could be for any of our panelists. And this is coming from Zania Torres. And again, my apologies if I don't like to mispronounce people's names. But Zania is asking, what is the approach that orgs can take to decenter loud voices and recenter those of Black, Indigenous, and Brown folks who often go voiceless? So I imagine you all are using this equity-centered community design process, and you're bringing those most impacted, right, that are in the driver's seat, and you're going to have some system partners there, right, with some education and power. And so can any of you talk about your approach that you would be taking or have taken to decenter those loud voices to ensure that Black, Brown, and Indigenous people are heard? Go ahead, Brother Token.
Yeah, so I'd like to say that one of the main approaches, or the way that we would take it using this, the equity-centered design, is overall making sure that we are going to the people with lived experience first. And so that is necessarily, if we're filtering it within that, the people who are less likely to express that they've gone through these things, we're giving them, making sure that we can give them a safe space of other people who have similar experiences, so then they can feel more free to express themselves and express the things that they've gone through, so that they are no longer voiceless. Making sure to, when you bring the very people with the lived experience to the forefront of the discussion, when they're the ones making the decisions, then it gives them the ability to learn how to become, more present and how to voice their concerns and issues along the way. So I'd say that giving that opportunity is one of the best ways to get that done.
Thank you, Brother Token. Dr.
Hey,
Tulee.
I think Brother Token stole my speech, by the way. But along those same lines, we always like to think of people to reassure people that their voice is very important. Always laying out these ground rules of being able to be acknowledged for their innermost thoughts, especially on sensitive topics. Acknowledging that their voice is very important for us to hear. Reassuring that nobody's going to provide any kind of controversy, never argue the person, always debate the issue, because sometimes there's going to be disagreements, but we always want to make sure that people's voices are loudly heard, regardless of where they come from. I always try to give people the platform that they deservedly have. And we always try to make sure the room is totally clear that there's going to be that we want everybody to have an opportunity to voice their innermost thoughts that are going to add to the conversation.
That's really beautiful, Dr. Tulee. As I hear you say that, it reminds me of how we're creating the space, right, where people can get a sense of their own power, where their voices are heard, where we're not tone policing, and people can authentically be themselves. And as you mentioned, creating some community agreements collectively so that partners co-create that liberated space from the very beginning. Brother Marvin.
Thanks, LaMont. You stole part of my speech. This is often a question asked in across many sectors of the work that I do, academically or out in community. Group-based decision-making is a process, and it encourages those taking part to engage. Community agreements create the space that hopefully allows everyone to be authentic in their involvement with what the group decides. I add in that learning more and more about result-based facilitation empowers those that are creating the spaces additional tools that help work with community. Another little piece of my story, I lived in a self-managed community called Tent City 3. Mr. Tulee, we stayed at Daybreak Star way back in the early 2000s several times. It was great to watch upwards to 100 or more men, women, and families come together to figure out how to address living in community. It gives me a lot that I pour back into the work, that no group is any different than any other. The needs are the same. Creating the space is powerful. And what some people look at as complications, I look at as part of the course of how we get to where we're going. I don't expect systems and communities to immediately come together and start working fine. There will be things that we will need to acknowledge, and as a group, work out how that will be represented in the work going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Marvin. And I appreciate all the work that you've done too. Marvin brings so much expertise in his work of helping tiny home villages of unhoused communities self-organize and govern, right, in that collaborative decision-making process. So we have a question by Carolyn Pointer. Thank you, Carolyn. And Carolyn wants to know, how can universities support this work? How can universities support this work? Dr. Tulee.
Well, I certainly would recommend a very concentrated effort towards research. There's not enough research that I believe that has been done. I know for Indigenous people, Native Americans, still a lot of numbers are not being crunched. And, you know, we do know anecdotally, just based on my observations, that our suicide rate is quite high in Native community veterans, especially even one of my own high school classmates. He unfortunately took his life. He was a Navy veteran, a SEAL. He was a Navy SEAL. And things like that, we never really understood what happened. And things like that I think are very important to find out why things like that happen. We'll never know if we never know. And I really would encourage universities to really start digging deep into those kind of very important matters. I'm not just speaking for Native people, but for all Indigenous people. Because as you know, we all face, I would say, enhanced challenges while we're in the military. And I think that's something that needs to be analyzed.
Thank you, Dr. Tulee. And I see Marvin and then Ben would like to add to this. Marvin.
Yes, universities tend to shy away from work that doesn't necessarily feed a safe environment. I think ignoring the fact that many homicides or acts of gun violence take place all across university campuses across our nation should invoke the need to take a deep look. I want to echo what I heard. We need to look into how this impact is for our communities, those coming to learn, and for the universities as a whole, and how we want to hopefully reduce and end gun violence across the board. And if asked, I could say universities could take an opportunity to join some of the research, bring their expertise to the work, and be part of a community response. Thanks.
Yes, to be a part of the community response and come out of the ivory tower and onto the ground, right? That would be powerful. And I think Ben, you had something you want to share.
Yeah, just one quick thing that I've been really diving into in this research is moving away from a deficits-based approach to a strengths-based approach and an action-based approach. I think especially with Indigenous research and research done on to Native American communities, it's often to highlight areas of disparity or areas of gaps and issues and challenges. It's often framed in a deficits-based research about just highlighting the ways in which Native communities are lacking. And I think moving towards a strengths-based approach and focusing on the solutions and the actions and the strengths and powers within those communities to change those challenges, I think, is really important. So I think just understanding that lens shift can be a small way to make big change.
Thank you, Ben. There were lots of yeses and hand claps on that. Absolutely. We weren't able to get to all the questions, but I believe the SRA folks will get some response back to folks. So thank you, Deborah and Shelley and Xiaohui. And so our apologies, but thank you. And Brother Jeffrey said kudos to the whole team. So we want to share some things and opportunity for those of you that are on the call to get involved in the Systems Alignment Innovation Hub, to hear more from our grantees. We are building community. Rachel is going to put the link in the chat, but we have a community power network that everyone is invited to. And the Community Power Network is an ongoing multicultural, multiracial forum on the potential for systems alignment initiatives to improve outcomes for Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. And we build community power to uplift lived experience, Indigenous wisdom, and community wisdom, and values, and assets, and strengths, like Ben mentioned, and most importantly, culture. Culture is the life force of a movement, and if a people's culture is respected, their power will grow. And our whole goal is to conduct research. That is how knowledge is produced, and knowledge is power, right? And so to conduct research and generate new knowledge on what works that decolonizes and reimagines rigor, to evaluate the feasibility or impact of systems alignment innovation, to leverage and adopt existing systems for action research innovations, and to also leverage transdisciplinary expertise. And so this Community Power Network, we meet monthly, and we have community office hours and a whole host of resources. So Rachel is putting in the chat the link and all of that for you all. Rachel, I think you, if you could put the link in, that'll be great. Oh, yeah, there it is. I believe I see Sadina put it in there. Wow, it's 10:14, 1 minute left. Lori, would you like to make a reflection comment, and then we'll turn it back over to Carrington? But do you have a quick reflection? Sorry to put you on the spot, Lori.
That's okay. Here we go. So reflection is, each of you were here for a reason. Our life paths have crossed for this moment. You heard what you heard. You saw what you saw. You opened up your eye gate, your ear gates. And now what do we do with that? So we now are calling on all of you who participated and heard what you heard to be our co-conspirators, our allies, our advocates, and our co-designers towards what we're trying to accomplish through equity-centered community design and decolonization and indigenization. So thank you all for the time and the generosity that you spent We look forward to seeing you on our life paths and our journey as we're continuing. We're going to be expecting to hear from you and see you at our Community Power Network. And please follow our journey of our 4 community-based organizations. So thank you. So grateful. Onward.
Thank you, Lori. And back to you, Carrington. And thank you so much, SFRA National Program Office, for all the amazing things that you guys are stirring up. It's good trouble.
I love some good trouble. I hate to end on an administrative note, because I think I want everyone to leave feeling inspired and empowered by all of the great work that you've joined to hear about today. So just really briefly, we will send out a link to the recording and slides from today's session, as well as from the first session, if you're interested in watching that. And if you are interested in connecting or have any feedback, you can always email us at Systems for Action or join for the Community Power Network. We'd be happy to make any connections that people are interested in making. So thank you again for joining. Thank you so much, System Alignment Innovation Hub and Grantees, for speaking all of your truths and telling us about the great work that you're doing. I really, really appreciate it. And I know that I'm leaving feeling inspired. So thank you. I hope everyone has a lovely rest of their Wednesday, and we'll see you soon.